Call to order the regular meeting of the Scio Township Zoning Board of Appeals, March 21st, 2024. I'd ask the secretary to call the roll. Here.
Ramey here. Walsh
Here.
Shields here. Noel here.
All right. Next item on the agenda is swearing in. All persons who will be giving testimony or evidence on the public hearing portion of the meeting, I'd ask you to please stand and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thanks. Will you be saying anything, sir? Okay, great. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Are there any persons wishing to make any public comment tonight?
We have two
Okay,
in the public. At this time, they do not have their hands raised. There's only one opportunity for public comment for ZBA.
so nobody's raised their hands, and anybody here want to make public
No
comment?
hands raised.
What's that?
No hands raised and
Okay, well, we'll move along to the next item on the agenda, public hearings. Today, we have,
You want to
a
stop the
request-
agenda?
what's that?
On the front page.
Well,
It's not a.
that's not really, it's really not
Part of the.
part of these at the moment.
It might be.
It might be next time. I'm just trying to do what's supposed to be done.
Yeah.
Public hearing, possible action, it says, but we're gonna take that off the agenda too. I don't think possible action is any part of, the agenda. Variance number 24001, RSB Equities LLC by A.R. Brower Company, 5411 Jackson Road, H-08-22-300-036 to allow construction of a 40-foot, 4-inch, 3-story hotel rather than the maximum 36-foot tall, 2-story building pursuant to section 36-75 of the schedule of regulations. Who will be here on behalf of the petitioner?
I am, sir.
And could you identify yourself for the record, please?
Sure. Steve Brower, A.R. Brower Company.
Okay, very good. Let me just outline for you the procedures for public hearings. According to our rules, the chairperson will open the public hearing by announcing the subject of the appeal, the petition by identifying the applicant's name, case number, specified request, and general location of the subject property, which I didn't do. The actual subject property is located in the vicinity of the southeast corner of Zeeb and Jackson in South Township. After I open the public hearing, which I have done, the chairperson will summarize procedures and rules and will call on the petitioner or the petitioner's representative to present statements in support of the appeal along with any supporting evidence. After that, the petitioner's agent or attorney may present the case, including presenting witnesses on his or her behalf. And that after that, members of the ZBA shall report on site inspection and any conversations with the petitioner which they may have had. After which time, members of the public who support the petitioner shall speak and correspondence will be read. After that, members of the public who oppose the petitioner speak and correspondence is read. After which time, chairperson may permit the petitioner a rebuttal within limits set by the chairperson. After which time, the chairperson will, upon motion of any ZBA member, announce the close of the hearing, or announce continuation of the public hearing to another specified time and date. If the hour is late or additional pertinent information must be obtained, after which time the ZBA deliberates the request and decides the issue, or if a majority of members decide more information or clarification is needed, the issue may be postponed to a future meeting. And then the chairperson, or the ZBA may elect to limit time permitted for each person to speak, if need be. But if that happens, we'll address it. So without further ado, Mr. Brower, I'll turn the floor over to you for your presentation.
Okay, thank you. I know you have all this in front of you, but just a brief overview. So as you just said, this is Z Road right here. Jackson Road's right here. So this car wash and the Burger King's right here. This is the bank, that's the Wendy's, this is the pharmacy. So this is the hotel, which is what we're requesting the variance for. So as you can see, it sits quite a ways off the road, and it's also has these two buildings in front of it. So this is a rendering that I think we also submitted to you. And, you know, per the letter from Carlisle Workman, the roof itself meets the height requirement for the township. And I think Doug and Laura in their email said that actually with these small parapets around here, that it does meet, I believe, their understanding of the intention of the ordinance. So the real issue in front of you is the fact that with the industrial zoning, the 36-foot height is limited to 2 stories. And obviously we're requesting 3, 1, 2, 3. So that's really what we need a variance for, to have 3 stories in this district. And, you know, the district itself, right? One of the purposes of the Jackson Road corridor overlay is to encourage these kind of mixed use developments. And this, you know, the plan, that overall plan that we're trying to get approved, the hotel, which needs the variance. This is a retail building, this is a multi-tenant flex space, and this is an office. So it is a mixed use development as supported by the ordinance. Any questions I can answer?
I'm sure we'll have a number of questions, Mr.
Okay.
Brower, but I'm not gonna limit you to what you want to say or what witnesses you want to present or any other evidence. It's still your floor and you can say what you want, but I think, you know, the ZBA is required by its own rules and by the ordinances to address several issues.
Sure.
I'm sure you well know this.
Sure.
So, for example, the first one that comes up is exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to the property that don't apply generally to other property or classes of use in the same district.
Okay, well, yeah, this, you know, the issue obviously is we're trying to put this here. You know, there's a hotel right over here, which is 4 stories that was approved 10 or 11 years ago. And you know, that got a height variance of 11 feet. We're not asking for that. We're just asking for a variance of the 3 stories instead of the 2.
Um, I do have a preliminary question, which, Mr. Luan might be able to address. Mr. Brower, it's still
That's fine.
you're in charge here, so if you want me to stop at any time, I'd be happy to.
Happy to have Doug's input. So.
Okay, Mr. Luan, in your summary, which is part of the record. Among other things, you note on page 2 that in, 11 years ago, another zoning board of appeals, I should note that none of the members are currently members of this ZBA, granted a variance for the Holiday Inn Express that is referred to by Mr. Brower. And the last sentence in the first paragraph of page 2 of your report under paragraph B as in boy, says a variance was previously granted for a hotel 10 feet and 1 story taller than is now being requested. To what are you referring to? Which one is that for the record?
I was referring to the Holiday Inn versus what the Brower request is.
Okay, so we're only talking about one other hotel.
Correct.
Okay, all right, because that was a little bit misleading. I'm sitting there going, did we have a ZBA request for another hotel variance? Because I didn't remember it. So thankfully, my memory isn't that bad. Is that what you're saying, Mr. Luan? It's not that bad, right?
Yes, I don't think your memory's that bad. And yes, it was, I was referring to, is trying to make a comparison between the Holiday Inn and
Got it.
this proposal.
Understood.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we do this at this point, Mr. Brower, if it's okay with you? Why don't we go around the table here, and I think there will be questions, so let's
Sure.
kind of address it in that fashion, if that's okay with you.
That's fine.
Ms. Knoll,
Is it okay if I sit down or you want me to stay standing?
whatever makes you
Okay.
comfy, we're not that strict.
Okay.
So Ms. Knoll, go ahead.
Okay, so did you present the prior variance request to the ZBA? Was it you?
No, well, what we had previously well, yes, we did. We went and got a conditional use and then we came for a variance for the higher building, right? That was denied. Then we looked at doing a PUD, that didn't work out. So now we're to this option to try to make it work.
So I'd like to understand why the PUD process didn't work out, because when you were here before, you were optimistic that was going to work.
Well, it became,
Let me just stop right now.
Okay.
The applicant was not here before us before.
Okay, I'm a little confused.
Okay, that's all right. Well,
But
because I think it's important we do get the procedural history straight.
yeah,
So Mr. Luan in his report does refer to a planning commission which recommended approval. I'm reading from his first page of his report. The planning commission recommended approval of the subject conditional use request at a meeting of October 24th, 2022, with one of the conditions that a height variance be granted to allow for the hotel use. Maybe that's what you're thinking.
no, I thought
They came in
for a
after that
four-story.
for a 4-story,
Yeah.
which we rejected.
We rejected it.
Oh, that we did?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, all right. So my memory is a little bit off.
Yeah.
Okay.
but yes, we did come in and request, because we got conditional use in the planning commission, but that required a variance. That was denied. So then we looked at the PUD route, that didn't work out. So now we're looking at
Before
doing
everything does.
after. So we went conditional use, then the variance for the
You're right.
4-story building.
Thank you.
You're better than me. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, it was 40, I don't know, 47, 48 feet. We needed like a 10-foot variance and that was denied. So then we tried to do that with the PUD. We couldn't, get to a plan that was acceptable to all the parties. So now we're looking at trying to do it this way.
I'm curious about the PUD process that you went through, because when you were here before, you were very optimistic that this could be worked out with the PUD.
Well, once we got back to the customer and showed them what the requirements were going to be and then what the township wanted and what he was willing to do, we couldn't get to a mutually agreeable solution.
Okay. So, and I remember there are some distinctions between the variance that was granted to the Holiday Inn. As I recall in the history of that we discussed previously at the CBA, the PUD option didn't exist. Is that correct, Doug?
No, I think the PUD option always existed. It's been there for many years. But the Holiday Inn was just a single use site. So maybe that may have been what the difference was. The site that the applicant is now looking at on the Zeeb Road, the current site, east side of Zeeb Road, has it's got a retail component and a hotel component and an industrial component. So it lent itself more to a PUD treatment where the hotel was just a hotel. And there probably was no way that was ever going to get approved as a PUD because it was just a single use. So that may have been, I saw that in the last
Yeah.
write-up, and I
Yeah.
think that's what it was referring to. That's what I would think it was referring
I
to.
think that's it. Okay. Okay, so I want to also mention to everybody that we have a Jackson Road Overlay District Committee that has just been set up to look at the zoning and the Jackson Road corridor. The first meeting is next week. I'm on the committee. So the issue of zoning is going to be studied very closely real soon here. And I'm
That's-
wondering, well,
That's important. I didn't know anything about that.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Okay, Doug can comment on that a little bit too. He'll be
Yeah,
leading through.
If you'd like me to, yeah, Kathy's right. The Jackson Road area is being studied with the possible conclusion that the Jackson Road Overlay District might be amended. We're not there yet, so I can't say what may or may not come of this group's discussion. But one of the things we're going to be talking about, I'm sure, is building height and whether we should stick with the 2-story building height limitation on Jackson. So I think that's going to be on the table for discussion.
Question by Ms.
Not to
Raymond.
interrupt you, but on that point, what is the reasoning for 2-story? I understand a height limit, but what's the reasoning for the number of stories within that height limit being 2 versus 3?
The ordinance just calls out for industrial zoning and it
Yeah.
limits it to 2 stories.
Oh, I see that, and in there,
Yeah.
they define what they mean by a story, but I'm just wondering, is there any reason why? Yes, I'm really asking Doug that question more, as to why, if you were meeting the height limit, 3 stories would be a problem.
Well, there's a couple things. So there's a provision in the zoning ordinance that talks about, just to give you a little background on why we're still stuck on the 2 stories versus 3 stories, because when they still meet the height. There's a section of the zoning ordinance that says whenever there's a conflicting part of the zoning ordinance, it falls back on the more strict provision. And so in this particular case, it's a 36-foot height limit, which they meet, but the more strict provision is the 2 stories. So while they meet the height, they don't meet the stories. So that's just a little background. That's why we're still here and why this wasn't approved, administratively. And the height, the thing I can think of with the height, that the industrial district that they're located in is a little unique with that tall of a height. And I believe it's set up because industrial buildings, particularly heavier industrial buildings, sometimes require, even though it's a single story, or maybe even 2 stories, require a higher height for equipment within the building. And so it's not necessarily, industrial height is not necessarily set to the same story limit that like a residential building or even a commercial building would be set to. The height's a little different based on what could be anticipated to be occurring within, inside of an industrial building. So I think that's why there's a difference here. And it's one of the only places that you do have this difference is in
Is there-
industrial height versus industrial stories.
Is there some public interest to be protected that is more protected if it says, if something is 2 stories as defined here versus 3, as long as it meets the height limit?
I could probably give an opinion on that. I don't know if there's anything Doug can say as far as the provisions of the ordinance, because I looked through them too.
Right, I mean, I see the definitions in here, I'm just trying to understand a little bit more of the policy.
Yeah,
guidelines.
the basic question, why
Yeah,
is
why
there a
would it make a
limitation of 2
difference?
stories as opposed to 3?
Yeah,
And maybe that's something we should get to it when we get to the discussion, but I think that's probably the central question here. Maybe I'm wrong.
well, I think it's the central question for Ms. Knoll's committee.
Yeah, well, it sounds like it now, but, and I can imagine some, but I don't want to get out of turn here. Is there anything specific in the ordinance that you can point to, Mr. Luan, that would shed some light on why there's a 2 stories as opposed to anything higher limitation?
No, there's nothing specific there. This is the height limitation and the story limitation is a long-standing requirement that, in part based on fire safety issues that were discussed and believed to be important, years ago. But as you can see from a more recent, a recent thought on this with the current Scio Township Fire Chief, that there doesn't seem to be as great a concern with that height restriction. And as a matter of fact, it's not just this fire chief, it was the previous fire chief as well. As long as the buildings are constructed to code and are sprinkled and that sort of thing. I think it's just a historic issue that has never been really addressed in a comprehensive way.
Well, the fire reason actually concerns me quite a bit, but again, that's something maybe we should deal with during the discussion phase. If you don't mind, I'm not.
Yep, no,
pushing
that's
it off.
fine.
I think it's
Yeah.
important to talk about.
Okay.
Ms. Knoll, we're still on your questions.
I'm okay for now.
Mr. Shields?
For me, a key question relates to your comment about
Sorry.
the primary conflict is between J-Rod ordinance, I-2 zoning. Could you elaborate more on that?
Well, that's the underlying zoning of the property, and because of that, like Doug was just alluding to, right? That underlying zoning, we meet the height requirement, but we don't meet the story requirement, okay? But, we, through all the process, right, we've been at this now for quite a while. The sentiment from the township has been that this piece of property is now somewhat construed as downtown Scio Township, right? And there's been suggestion of you trying to do residential, well, to make some kind of residential work, right, condos or apartments, you'd have to be 3-4 stories tall. So you'd be right, you can't go that high in 36 feet and you can't go that many stories because you're stuck at the 2, right? So it all comes right back to, a zoning ordinance that was written when Malloy was there kind of by themselves before the Wendy's was built probably, and, you know, that's 40 years ago, and obviously that corner has changed dramatically in the last 40 years, right? You know, Wendy's was there and Myers wasn't there, and I think Banfield's was there, but banks weren't there, all those other developments weren't there. It was, you know, there's Hayfield still there, right? Now we're 40 years later and, you know, we're dealing with different issues.
Yeah, we had 2-lane roads.
Yeah, it was a 2-lane road, right, before the boulevard went in. I mean, it's, if you think about change in 40 years, right, that corner is kind of a poster child, right?
Another question, you state that, the surrounding property owners will not be adversely affected. Could you elaborate on your thinking on that?
Well, I think that, you know, a Burger King is not gonna be concerned about a hotel. I don't think the car wash is gonna be concerned. You know, we have the property to the north that we will eventually want to redevelop, and, you know, the township obviously have a lot of input on that. It's going to be some kind of a business use, I would expect, okay? To our east is a very large wetland that we can't impact, and east of there are businesses. So we think it's a good fit for that piece of property to, you know, put that use, and it's also an extended stay use, which is not currently available in the township. So it brings, you know, that either township residents or people, you know, coming to do business in the township or in Ann Arbor. So I think it fills a need in the marketplace.
And what about, traffic flow? Or,
Well, we've done extensive traffic studies, and there's actually some discussion, I think that will, you know, if we're approved tonight, there will be discussion between the township and the road commission. The road commission wants a barrier in the middle of the road to prevent left-hand turns in and left-hand turns out of our access road. Okay, my understanding, at least preliminarily, is the township doesn't really want that. Okay, so how, you know, walk 2 buildings down, right? Somebody's gotta have that conversation and say, are we gonna build this or aren't we? In all the traffic studies that we've done, that's what the road commission would like to see.
that's all.
Can I ask for a clarification of that, Mr. Brown,
Sure.
what you just said, and we'll get back to you with any question. Barrier where? You mean on?
Let
on
me show you on the site plan. It's a little easier to show you than try to explain it.
Where? On Z?
on Z.
Yeah, so right here. Yeah, right here, this is it right here. So this is very similar. I don't know if you've ever go down to the Ann Arbor Saline Road south of 94. There's shopping centers on either side there. Well, the one that's on the right where I think Target is, you can't come out of that access road and go across Ann Arbor Saline Road because this same type of barrier is here. That's the one, when they sent us back our first submittal, they said, hey, we want this barrier. We want you to model it after that one. So we've shown it here, but Doug and Laura picked up on it. A few other people have, and there's discussion on, you know, whether this is really going to happen or not, but we showed it because that's what the road commission is saying they would like.
Appreciate
Okay.
it. Mr. Shields?
A couple more, questions. What's your reaction to the neighbor's comment about light pollution?
Well, the township,
I'll bring it up later, but we also have another email that came in today that was forwarded to us. Did everybody see that?
got to it.
What's that?
I said, we'll get to it.
Okay, well, all right, we will. There's another one.
Okay.
Another person who lives in that general vicinity. Go ahead.
Well, we have prepared a photometric study. We'll submit that again as part of our formal site plan approval package. But the township's ordinance is very specific on what's required, and we're required to be 0-foot candles at the property line. So, you know, all those other buildings along there and Myers, you know, the buildings that are surrounding this, they all have the lighting. You know, Jackson Road has the lighting. So I think you know, we'll certainly do our best, but we will meet the township ordinance. And I think that does a pretty good job of minimizing light pollution.
And just for the record, Ms. Brower, you're referring to the lighting ordinance.
Well, your zoning ordinance requires us to submit a photometric study with meeting specific parameters. We have to meet them.
Just for the record, just so anybody who might be listening would understand.
Yeah, and you know, we'll meet that ordinance.
That's it, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Mr. Yang?
You answered my questions.
Okay.
Mr. Walsh?
I have no additional questions.
Yeah. I did, spend a little bit of time over there looking at the project area and then driving around to the south in order to appreciate the comment of the, we've received from, one of the neighbors that can be essentially southeast, so to speak. And I did look at it and I saw it, no matter what, there will be additional light far away because just the hotel rooms being lit up and it will be there. In any event, I mentioned that in passing. And just for purposes of the record, Mr. Brower, Mr. Luan's summary also refers to a 13,500 square foot office building, a 25,000 square foot flex office / light manufacturing building, and an 8,000 square foot multi-tenant retail building with drive-through. Again, those are all, would be no more than 2 stories.
Yeah, they don't require a variance. Everything else, we're talking about the site plan here, right? So these 3 buildings are all completely compliant with the J-Rod. Okay, the only issue, as I said before,
Is
is
the hotel.
this building being 3 stories instead of 2. And then, you know, every other part of the J-Rod, it complies with.
And if I remember correctly from your presentation earlier, was that from the prior request, was that the brand required certain number of stories. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was, yes, that was a big issue. So what happened is the owner of the hotel got back with their brand, right? And there was a lot of lengthy discussion and finally they came to an agreement to make it 3 stories instead of 4.
And what is the reason for needing 3 stories?
Well, it's a question of density, right? I mean, these buildings are, their efficiency is by their height. That's why they want them to be 4 stories, right, instead of 3.
Well, sure, the more hotel rooms you have, the more money is going to be generated.
Well, the number of hotel rooms is basically the same, right? It's how much area it covers, right? This building had 3 stories, right? If going back to the previous plan, this building is now considerably longer than what it was before, right? So we've repositioned this so that they can fit a longer building on this site. So if it goes to 2 stories, it would have to be all the way out to here, right, to make it work. And that just gets to be.
When you're referring to
Yeah.
get out to here, you're talking about to the west side of the
Well, this
big
is,
property area.
well, this is north, right? So.
Excuse me,
Yeah,
yeah.
the building, this has come farther north already and it will come farther north again. Okay,
But that does mean that the project still could be done. It just you would not have as much, you'd have to spread out the building to make it work.
yeah, well, I'm sure that, if I go back to them and say it needs to be 2 stories, that they will not want to proceed.
I guess I'd like to get more discussion about the need for 3 stories though. To say the brand, and that is, I think the quote that came from the earlier one, that a brand requires something and therefore you need it. And you're asking the zoning ordinance to basically say, would you please approve the brand's requirement? It strikes me that that's kind of a self-imposed type of limitation.
Yeah, well, this is, there's a couple issues here. There's the land area, right? There's the cost of construction, but if you look at all the new hotels that have been built around Ann Arbor, which there are a great many, they're all 4 or 5 story hotels, right? And that's, it's a function of economics. They have to build a footprint that makes sense.
Well, when you're referring to the other buildings in the Ann Arbor area, certainly Ann Arbor, as I've read, is allowing additional heights of their buildings.
Encouraging.
Pardon?
Encouraging.
Yeah, that's what they want to do. This is not Ann Arbor.
I realize that.
And there's no desire, as shown by the other buildings along Jackson. I drove the whole thing a couple of times just to see, what everyone else was doing there. And the only one that appears to have more than the traditional 2 stories is the IHA building. But that's only because it drops off, the ground drops off. And it's really just a big basement. But otherwise, at the average height of the ground, it's all pretty much 2 stories. The way that I looked at it. And I don't see anything else in the Jackson Road corridor which varies from that. Are you aware of any?
Well, there's the, U of M's hospital that's in Parkland Plaza is more than 2 stories.
Well, that one, yeah, that's
I want to say, as I recall, and Doug, you can add information here. Michigan Medicine Hospital and outpatient facility, IHA outpatient facility did not have to comply with certain provisions of our zoning ordinance.
Correct.
Okay.
They didn't have to, they were considered a university facility and they never actually even went through site plan approval.
okay. Well. All right, well, let's just move along.
I have one more question too. So the site plan as you're presenting it tonight isn't a PUD, this is straight zone.
Yes, this is under the J-Rod zone. Okay.
This is essentially a repeat of the previous one, except for a 3-story building instead, and no height versus the 4-story and a height request.
Yeah, right.
I have a question, and it's stimulated by, it's not relevant to, it's stimulated by this appeal. Is my wife and I always go and look at these sites, and we've been looking at buildings and trying to find out where the machinery is hidden.
You mean the stuff on top of the
The stuff on top, yeah, and I don't see big structures hidden. Where is the parapet walls is, so that's these little chunks, right?
Well, the hotels typically have, HVAC equipment by room. So you won't see big rooftop equipment like the plant that's there. There's a big dust collector. If you went to the site, you saw the great big dust collector that's left over from when Malloy used the building, right? That's higher than what the height of this hotel will be, right? And that's what they needed as part of their printing operation. Eventually when that warehouse comes down, that dust collector will come down with it.
So that additional 4 feet, 4 inches, where is that?
Well, it's this area. It's just these parapets that are around the roof, right?
So if there's no mechanicals there, it seems like it's.
Yeah, it's a construction architectural detail, right? This is, that they put these parapets on it.
So it has nothing to do with the mechanics.
No.
Hmm.
But you know, typically a flat roof building like this, there is a parapet around the building. It's quite common.
Thank you. Glad to have that cleared up.
Other questions? All right, let's go around the table. Have any of the members visited the site and had any conversations with the petitioner?
No, I've driven by the site. I have not had any conversations with the petitioner.
Mr. Walsh?
I drove by when I was here previously, but I did not this time. I have not discussed with the petitioner.
Yeah, I went by there, couple of times this time around, but I have not spoken with the petitioner. Mr. Walsh? Or excuse me, you stated, Mr. Shields?
I visited, didn't talk to anybody.
Okay, Ms. Knoll?
I've driven by, haven't talked to anybody.
At this time, I'll ask whether there are any members of the public who support the petitioner, who wish to speak.
No hands raised, there's a hand here.
Hi, I'm,
Okay, you will be giving evidence and,
no, I just had my public comment.
on this. Technically, I think you're supposed to be sworn in. Do you mind?
No, no problem.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony in these proceedings will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Jim Chaconis, 780 Steinbach, Chelsea, Michigan. My occupation is commercial real estate. I do 65% of everything in Washtenaw County. I've done hotel sites, and if we try to go to 3-story, 2 stories, they're gone. I mean, I've done a lot of, they will not build it. Their cost efficiency, as you go wide, your costs go up, you know, your foundation, your footings, your construction. I'm amazed that this hotel would even go to 3 stories. I did hotels south of Ann Arbor. I've done the hotels downtown Ann Arbor. So the hotel people dictate, you know, they have to have so much density. And I've never seen one, it's the first time I've seen one that would let us go to 3 stories. So we want a hotel, which is, I think, brings, you know, things here. You know, the Reed, he wants to put an office building and stuff there. It's good for the township. I've done a lot of work here, from the Tractor Supply to the Menards to the Lowe's. Quite a bit here. So I'd really like to see it come. It has nothing to do with me, it's just support of Steve, because this is what I do for a living.
Thank you. Could you fill in, your name and address on the sheet there appropriately? I appreciate it. Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak in support of the petition?
I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, and there's no one else here in the room, so we'll move on to members of the public who oppose the petitioner. Are there any members of the public who oppose the petitioner who wish to speak?
No hands are raised.
Okay, we do have correspondence from, well, we have the one that's in the packet. By Mr. Angerman, who refers to increased light pollution and would detract from the current aesthetics and decrease property values of several neighbors. In addition to that, we have an email that was,
For the record,
yeah,
I would note that the letter from Mr. Angerman says that he opposes the variance to allow for a higher 3-story hotel. And I think, and it may be worth amending the petition just to make the record clear. As I understand it, you are not seeking variance for a higher hotel. than is permitted. You are simply seeking a variance at this point for the number of stories. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
There's also a email forwarded to us by Ms. Well, I guess it went from Culberson, Jan Culberson to Laura Krebs and Doug Luan, and somebody forwarded it to us.
To you.
Oh, just to me.
Could you read it into the record for us?
Yeah, I was just trying to figure out who sent it to me. It's dated, Thursday, March 21st at 4:11 PM to Ms. Culbertson. Subject opposing the hotel 303, well, it gives an address. We'll make this part of the record, the email. Blocking out an email address at the very top, which happens to be mine. I'll give it to Mr. Shields to give it to staff at the township, because I didn't make another copy of it. And it reads as follows. And it does have the address of Jennifer Tankanow, Tankanow. It says, "Hi, Jan, I know this is at the last minute, but I wanted to write in opposition to the proposed hotel building. I live on Hunter's Trail and I'm confident that the building will add to light pollution. We purchased on this street specifically to enjoy the open space and serenity of the wetlands behind us. I have been a Scio resident for a long time, and I hope that we can keep the commercial buildings in an area that does not impact the many residents who live there. Thank you, Jennifer Tankanow." Email address in two places. I'll give that to Mr. Shields. Are there any other members of the public who oppose the petitioner who desire to speak?
No, she didn't. She said no.
That would be shown here on this screen if it was.
I think Christie said no, but we can always come back if we need to when she comes back to the room.
Sounds good. Is that okay with everyone?
Yeah.
All right. Next, the petitioner may have a rebuttal if petitioner feels like it.
No, sir.
We will, I guess, entertain a motion to close the public hearing with the proviso that if there's another person in the public who desires to speak, when Christie comes back, we'll reopen it for that purpose.
So moved.
I'll support.
Moved by Ms. Rain. Well, maybe we don't need to entertain that motion. Christie could just tell us whether anyone else has raised their hands indicating a desire to speak in opposition to the petitioner.
No, there's no hands raised.
Okay, great. In which case, why don't we
Move to
omit
close
that
the-
motion?
Second.
All right, all in favor of the withdrawal of the motion, say
Well-
aye.
I'm
Aye.
moving to close the public hearing.
Oh, that one. All right,
I'll support it.
motion by Ms. Ramey to close the public hearing, supported by Mr. Walsh. Call the roll.
Hoff,
Yes.
Ramey,
Yes.
Walsh,
Yes.
Shields, yes, no,
Yes.
Two-story versus three-story is the question. Any thoughts on that, matter?
You're opening for discussion?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this looks like an excellent development and seems entirely appropriate for this space. And it's something that I would think would be a good thing to do. I cannot see a way under the ordinance that we can grant it. Because I think the ordinance is clear on that. There's nothing beyond an economic imperative to make it 3 stories. I think this is something that we ought to look at very closely in the zoning ordinance as soon as possible. Because I think that the public interest would favor higher density development in the appropriate corridors where we've already determined that we're going to allow commercial development. This seems like that sort of a place, but I can't see anything under the terms of the zoning ordinances or the presentation that legally justifies a variance.
In other words, no exceptional circumstances. There's,
Other than the economics of the maintaining the footprint, which I think makes sense, but I'm not sure. I'm sort of hoping somebody here will be able to talk me out of that. Because I really, I don't like that result.
um,
And I could be talked out of it if somebody's got some.
I'm not the one really to talk you out of it so much, because I guess I had the same sort of analysis, but what does everyone else think? Bob, you've been pretty silent.
I'm pretty silent because I think this gets back to what I mentioned with Mr. Luan is this is a redo, except we're coming in at 3 stories instead of at just 3 stories, not 4 stories and height.
Yeah.
My perspective is we've had the discussion. This fits what I think J-Rod wants to do. Even though the harder or harsher is the 2 stories versus 3, I think realistically what we're looking at in the district as it stands now is height. It's not stories. So for me, part of what we agree to and what our function is as a ZBA is, does this make sense given where we think it's going to go? The answer on the extenuating circumstances is hotels are built multi-storied. Not that we're bound by the previous ZBA because we've had this discussion. They're all individual decisions. But a previous ZBA said, yes, we can have a multi-story hotel in a different location. I'm looking at this and saying, given that it meets the height requirements, the issues on light and traffic and everything else, that's not our purview. That goes back to the planning commission and then ultimately to the board. This is strictly, does a 3-story building that meets the district height requirement make sense in lieu of 2 stories, which is what's in the ordinance? I think this is reasonable to me.
And we think the extraordinary circumstances would be the hotel, the standards of the hotel industry.
Standards for the hotel industry say you build up.
For me, spent a lot of time soul searching about precedent in the Holiday Inn. And we always talk about these things being separate. And I'm having this hard time holding my mind that I'm supposed to do that while I drive by the hotel all the time. And see that in fact, this has less height. And I'm really struggling with what is the right thing to do in this situation. And I lean towards accepting it because of the Holiday Inn, recognizing that there's this question about, we're not saying precedent, but golly, it's hard to hold that in your mind when it's right there.
Ms. Noel, what are your thoughts?
Well, I have concerns with this. We have a zoning ordinance. We're going to have this J-Rod committee start to meet next week. And perhaps we could give the committee time to do its work. Yes, it sounds like a good development. Yes, they're getting closer to. But our charge is to uphold the zoning ordinance. I also want to say, and I said this before, when you were here before, there are many residence inns around the Midwest who they only have 2 stories. So pre-pandemic, I was showing dogs and I would frequently stay in a residence inn because they allow dogs. And they're, Kalamazoo, Nashville, St. Louis, a lot of these places have residence inns that just are 2 stories. So this is, my experience, my history with them. They're great hotels, but I have a problem here, and I would like to give this Jackson Road Committee time to do its work.
Okay. Well, let me say a couple of things here. First of all, as Mr. Shields pointed out, there's a 4-story hotel on the south side of on the north side of I-94, which was given a variance 11 years ago or so. And I look at the minutes of that hearing, including the motion which was voted upon for approval of the variance. And I think that all of us here now realize, after taking a quick look at it, that that is really an exceptionally artificial way of bringing a motion for approval of a variance, because the reasons stated are just not there. And this was back at a period of time when it was my impression of the zoning ordinance, of the zoning board of appeals. And I came at some point after that and became a member. And I got the impression back then that zoning board of appeals had never seen a variance they didn't like. And things were approved that I think this board would simply not have anything to do with them. And I don't know, even from looking at these minutes or from anything else I have knowledge of, why that variance was approved. Now, it was 11 years ago, and looking back on it, I guess if we could wave a magic wand, would we have approved that here? I don't think this zoning board would. The only thing I can say is it is on the other side of the freeway, albeit that it may be in the Jackson Road Overlay District. It's really on the other side of the freeway. It's kind of a different animal over there. And I suppose if I had the choice of turning back the clock and looking at it, I'd want more reason that is given in this in these minutes than the minutes show. Any event, that's one thing. The other thing is, and perhaps it's just me, but I really feel fairly strongly about this. And I referenced the height of a building, and Chief Andrew Hoot's letter dated April 10th, 2023, which is part of the record here. The whole issue is whether the fire department can handle a loss, and it would be probably of great magnitude of a hotel without a ladder truck available to Scio Township on its own. And what Chief Hood is saying, and he said a couple other things I remember, that, well, they call for mutual aid and get the ladder truck. Well, I think the only ladder truck is Ann Arbor. I think, and I'm not sure, but I would need more information for what the mutual aid agreement really is. What are the circumstances under which Scio Township would ask for a ladder truck to come over, and how long would it take to get here? And then there's the real bothersome issue of to me at least, is what happens if the ladder truck is being used? And is that likely to happen? No, probably not. It'd be very unusual. But it's that one time that, especially when you have so many people gathered in one spot in a hotel, and if something ever happens, God forbid, what could be done? And that's a real issue. Now,
With all due respect, though,
yeah,
that's a question of height. And if this building, if we've already got an ordinance that permits the height that they're proposing, I don't know that that's a question. And the other issue, at least to me, is that I don't feel that we have the expertise to second guess the fire chief.
that's also correct too. And I was gonna get to that. With all due respect, I was getting there. And of course, there's the modern day fire suppression equipment, which people smarter than me tell me it works great, but I just worry about. And yeah, Chief Hood basically says in his letter that, they can't really do 2 stories without it, because they don't have a truck. And that's a concern to me too, because I'm sitting there going, what are you proving if we can't? What's gonna happen? And that's for the board.
There was
Really?
an article in MY a couple months ago from the city of Ann Arbor fire chief or firefighters talking about how as density increases in an area, the needs for equipment and staff increase. So yes, we could possibly handle it, but as density in this Jackson Road corridor continues to increase, our needs are increasing.
Yeah. Well, in any event, I bring it up because that just bothers me. Not only on this, but on other matters.
I was gonna say is given the expansion upwards in the city of Ann Arbor, the bigger question is how many ladder trucks do they have? I mean, it's not a matter of one, they've gotta be multiples because there's just too many high-rise buildings.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, but again, this is outside of, I think this is something that eventually gets back into ultimately the board.
It does. And of course, we know that the request for additional monies was voted down essentially 2-1. And so that, I'll conclude it by simply saying, that's something the board is gonna have to, and I'm sure that they are involved in that. Okay, then the only other point I wanna make on 2-story stuff, 2-story buildings, is that if you do, as I said, if you drive up and down Jackson Road, basically everything's 2 stories. And once you do allow higher ones, it kind of begins to change the overall community appearance. And
But once again, this before us is not looking for a higher building.
I agree, it's the 3-story versus 2-story. But
It's just how much you sandwich in between the permitted height and the ground.
yeah,
That's all as I understand it, that's the only question we're dealing with here.
Yes, that's my
Yes,
understanding.
I'm going on and on a little bit, only because I just wanted to make sure everyone understands at least the way I would view this in the future. So that's pretty much all I got to say. And I think that at least perhaps inartfully, the issues I'm raising hopefully are now going to be considered by your committee, Ms. Dahl. So it actually has been formed?
Yes. It has members from the planning commission, the board of trustees, and I believe the DDA.
Oh, one other thing I was gonna ask you, Mr. Walsh, any input from the planning commission on any of this?
I don't think this is, well, since I've been on the planning commission beginning of December, this has not come back to
Okay,
the
so they're
planning
not,
commission.
all right. Okay.
Kind of heard three different perspectives on this. There's been some for yes, some for no, and some for table.
Haven't heard the table too much, but
I think indirectly, that's what,
Are you saying I said it indirectly?
I think the implication was that there is a potential out there that maybe we give the committee a chance to make a decision, recognizing the unfortunate thing that committees take a fairly substantial amount of time to make a decision.
I know.
Yeah, tell us more about that process and the timing.
As it stands right now, the committee is only supposed to meet 3 times. And the future meeting dates are into May tentatively. But that
So
should
it should be-
change. It's going to be quick.
But then it would, whatever decisions made, let's say for an example, a zoning change in this zoning ordinance was recommended, then it would go back to,
To the planning commission, I believe. And then to the board of trustees. for approval.
Is Doug still on the line there? Would he be?
yeah, he's here.
Yes, that is true. That's what we're trying to do, a 3-meeting committee, and then that would go back to the planning commission for the planning commission to amend, the ordinance, taking the kind of recommendations from this committee.
And is that, I'm just ignorant on the process. Does the planning commission then recommend a change in the ordinance, which the trustees then vote on?
Yes,
Yes.
How long does that process take?
depends. There's no clear answer.
Yeah.
It could take months.
Yes.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what do you want to do?
I would rather table it.
Mr. Chair, are we allowed to ask the petitioner what the implications are to them of what tabling?
Well, sort of began to think that they probably would.
They would prefer an answer, but
An answer, yeah.
I,
I want to assume that.
yes.
Well, I'll ask the petitioner, would you rather it be tabled or would you rather it be voted on?
Would rather it be voted on.
Kind of reasonable.
I'm not gonna argue. I think it is. It's unfortunate timing, but that's, things happen that way.
All right, well. Doesn't look like there's a big support for tabling. If you want to make a motion,
That's okay.
so the question becomes, what other motion is someone gonna make here?
Where are we leaning? I'll make a motion in support of the applicant, if that's all right with everyone. For statement of facts, that this came, and was approved, recommended approval from the planning commission on October 24th, 2022, with the conditions of a height variance be granted to allow for hotel use. Recognizing that the applicant was before the CBA previously in 2023, asking for a 4-story hotel with a variance, I think in the neighborhood of 10 feet, but I don't remember the specifics. That in this case, the applicant is recommending a building that meets the 36-foot height requirement, and the parapet meets the 5-foot requirement on top of the building. I think those are the key facts for this discussion.
And I would add 2 others that a variance has previously been granted for a 4-story hotel in the immediate vicinity, and that the industry standards for hotels we are told, and no one has refuted that, typically call for a minimum of 3 stories.
Circumstances, but
Okay, go ahead.
I think that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions, being specifically the footprints for hotels tend to be multi-story. They're not always the case, but I think given the size of this parcel, that is applicable. I think that the variance is necessary for the preservation, right enjoyed by other properties. The example being the 4-story hotel, Holiday Inn Express, built north of I-94 off of Zebra. The granting of such a variance or modification is not material detrimental to public welfare or materially injurious to the property or improvements in such a zone. I know there are concerns about light standards and others, but those will be addressed in the planning commission and by the board of trustees. And the applicant has said they intend to meet Scio Township's ordinances on those things. The granting of such a variance will not adversely affect the purpose or objectives of the master plan of Scio Township. And absent exceptional circumstances, which would otherwise result in substantial injustice, circumstances or conditions upon which the variance is based do not result from the actions of the applicant or the predecessors. So I'm in favor.
Okay, motion to grant the variance by Mr. Wolf. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Shields. Any discussion? I don't think I can go along with that.
That's
The reason is because it's premised on the existence of the granting of a variance 11 years ago for a 4-story. I'm just not seeing it. I don't think I can support that.
I'm okay. We can vote it down. I mean, this was get something out there. If we vote no, then we've got another motion to make.
All right. Any other discussion? All right, call the roll. No.
Ramey,
Yes.
Walsh,
Yes.
Shields, yes. No,
No.
All right, the motion passes. Let me. Get a written decision. I'll give it to you in just a moment. You. Mr. Shields, would you give this to the applicant, please? Good luck.
Okay, appreciate your time tonight.
Mr. Shields, I'm gonna keep one copy. I'm gonna give you the other two copies of the decision granting the request.
Fran will get it in the morning.
What's that?
Doug,
He better be.
I have a quick question for him, but I can wait. It's not on this issue.
Okay, well, let's kind of move along, because we do have some other things we have to do here, so let's, go right here. What's on the agenda here, old business, I'll just say, I don't know where this all got circulated, but there was, I think it'd be fair to say that there was a request or really should be entitled a complaint made by a person at one of our prior meetings some months ago regarding the person's name and address being on the minutes of the ZBA because the person had, if my memory is correct, objected to a particular variance request. And the person, as I understand, performed what the person says, I guess is kind of standard for that person, did a monthly check of the internet for the name and address and found it in the minutes. So, the long and short of it is that, it's wound up being referred to the, township attorneys for guidance. And I haven't heard anything. That was back in end of February. I don't know, did that go to anybody else?
I
Kathy,
don't
were you
know. I
advised
mean,
on
if not.
Okay,
So you sent
the-
it to Mariah, thanks?
I didn't know, Joyce Parker did, has referred it,
Okay.
and I haven't heard anything back, so. And the issue becomes, and I think it's something worthy of discussion. Whether people's names and addresses should go into the minutes. Because then it becomes part of the internet. I don't know what anybody else's reaction to it is. I think that there should be, and I've already taken a step today, by only requiring a name for public comment. That's public comment, not something that's, come up on a public hearing or anything. And I think, I'm in the midst of addressing that in a proposal for change to our rules of procedure. But, the idea that someone who makes public comment, should that person give a name? Or should it be anonymous?
Giving a name, I know we've had people who have made public comment, just say that they're a Scio resident. I settled at that. I
Right.
think the incident in question was an email to community. Because
It was
they were neighboring to that property.
Yes,
And that's when it came up with the address. Whether the email had the address or not, I don't know. And I'd have to go back to see if the address was then
Yeah, I think-
transcribed into the minutes, which might be more of a procedural issue with the township of don't transcribe an address, but to a certain point, if you send an email to the township on an issue, it's gonna be in the agenda package.
Yes, that's the
And-
case.
And then it becomes whose responsibility would it be to edit out any significant details, phone number, address,
Well,
before it gets published?
yeah, I don't think phone numbers, and take a step back. The township standard forms for the sign-in sheets had for years
Address and phone number.
included a request for a name, address, and phone numbers on everything.
Yep.
And, this only came up because a person had actually addressed a, objection. And that, I think, number one, the address and the name, I think name is required on anything, including public comment, but, and perhaps an identification of whether the person is a Scio Township resident or not, I don't know.
So I'm just looking at the Open Meetings Act here right now, and there is a provision that says a person must not be required as a condition of attendance at a meeting of a public body to register or otherwise provide his or her name or other information or otherwise to fulfill a condition precedent to attendance, but this is
That's
attendance.
Absolutely correct, and I agree with that.
I guess just bigger picture. It may have happened in this, but as you noted, the sign-in sheet is the same for pretty much every committee, so this
Well-
really isn't a ZBA specific. We just happen to be the catalyst.
Well, then I was told that actually the Board of Trustees has in its rules of procedure a requirement that people do give names and addresses.
And apparently each body can establish their own rules of procedure about that.
Okay, well, going forward, my belief is that, first of all, everyone should give a name, public comment or giving an opinion on a particular, or giving evidence on a particular, variance request, for example. Name is always required. I say name and address is required for those people talking about a particular request for variance, or any other public hearing we have, because the address is important for trying to figure out where in relationship to this, for example, a particular parcel is that neighbor resides. If they're a mile away, well, it's different from being next door. So that part of it, I believe, ought to be required, my opinion, for testimony at a public hearing of any sort. even if it's an opinion, I'm in favor of this still. I'd like to know who the person is. And, you know, what the address is in order to judge that. Whether that needs to be published in the minutes, different story. But, since we're gonna get to a proposed amendment to our rules, I'll probably have to do it the next one too. But we can do that kind of easily. But I'd like to get I'd like to hear from everybody on it.
I agree with you, Tom. It should be the name and the address when it's speaking about a specific situation, because it's important to know where they are in relationship to the property in question.
Ms.
I
Noel?
basically agree with you.
You're right about and I did look at that too, for the same purpose. Ms. Ramey?
Yeah, I agree just with what, Mr. Shields said.
Okay, Mr. Wallace, I agree. Well, let me put something together for the next meeting as a proposed amendment that kind of handles that. Okay, that's that other business. And another business, by the way, we did receive an email from the township attorney, Mariah Fink, who, in case you haven't heard, I can't remember whether I sent this along. Ms. Fink said, with reference to the lawsuit brought against the township for refusal to allow a variance, that reading the wrong one, that Ms. Fink indicated that she was successful in her argument before the circuit court and that the matter had been ruled in favor of Scio Township. So, and Ms. Fink particularly said, where's the effect that there was a good record that was made. So there you go.
Good job keeping us focused on it, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
So that's my other business. Does anybody else have any other business? Or old business, I guess. So let's move along to approval of minutes.
I'm gonna do this, change the order.
We're gonna get that's in other business. Somehow or another it
There you go.
became
There it is. Yep.
paragraph 102. I don't know what that means, but it's
You're
there.
right.
So let's go to approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of the January 18th, 2024 meeting. Are there any corrections that need to be done to that?
I have one.
You found one?
I have one.
Fire away.
On page 3, fourth paragraph from the bottom, it starts, Noel asked the applicants. Every
Yeah.
other indication starts with member.
Oh, in other words, make it,
Member
refer to it as member Knoll.
Should be, yes.
Okay, if we could just change that to refer to Ms. Knoll as member Knoll. Anything else?
That was the only one I found.
That was
Impressive.
pretty good. I went through, I couldn't find anything.
So move to approve the minutes
As
as amended.
Second.
It's been moved by Ms. Ramey, seconded by Mr. Walsh to approve the minutes as amended. Any discussion? I call the roll.
Auth,
Yes.
Ramey,
Yes.
Walsh,
Yes.
Shields, yes. No.
Yes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is other business information report on Plan Commission liaison. That's you, Mr. Walsh.
I understand that. Last meeting we had, there were 2 items. One dealt with the movement of or readjustment of Stabler Road Park. The proposal came in, was this a minor or a major adjustment to the PUD? If it was minor and we approved it, then it would have gone forward. But both the presenting party and the planning commission agreed this was major and that this needed to have a public forum. So that'll be coming into a planning commission meeting, most likely the end of April. It hasn't been scheduled yet.
So what's basically they want to do with stable?
What, there are multiple county and state parties that have a say in how that intersection is. What they're trying to do is eliminate the two bridges, the one that's goes under Park and the one that goes into one. The question is how to do it. The presenters discussed that Eagle has pretty much said their requirement is minimal disturbance of the existing creek bed. And that's what's pushing the road eastward and cutting down some of the open space in the development there versus other options. So again, that's quick summary. That's going to be coming forward for public discussion. You're all welcome to join us when it's out there, but the other item that came up was an ongoing discussion on creating more specific ordinances for solar energy. Scraps has extensive experience doing this for other townships. She's continuing to refine what she's presenting to us, and that'll be an ongoing item for the planning commission. For the next meeting, we have a discussion about rezoning a property, I believe, off of Baker Road, north of I-94. Don't have the specifics on that yet, and continuing discussion of the proposed Firestone Service Center. I believe that'll be west of Culver's on Jackson Road.
Is the Baker Road one the many hands?
Yes, I believe it
The
is.
what?
I'd have,
Many hands.
What is that?
Well,
it's,
that was part of an annexation request that had been put out there. There are 3 parcels in this property. Many Hands was a part of it. There are some other parcels. And the board was originally told that this was to be handled together. It was going to be a comprehensive plan and not, this is shifting a little bit. So I'll be curious to hear.
the item number is Berkzell Properties Rezoning, IRP to I-1. Which I
Yeah,
believe.
that's not it.
No, all right.
Okay,
Sorry, I didn't
okay. That's
look
what
at
it
the
is.
agenda came out. I haven't looked at it yet in detail.
Okay. So it's a different one.
And that's off of Stabler, that rezoning is off of Stabler Road, not Baker Road.
Thank you. Again, like I said, I'm sorry, I hadn't.
Well,
gone into
Stabler,
detail.
specifically Stabler and Park,
This won't let me.
right, Doug?
Stabler, just north of the Kiwanis folks, off of Stabler, east side. of Stabler.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought we were talking about what is it, Trailwoods?
No,
Geez, is that ever gonna get paved?
No, don't go there, please.
All right.
I'm
Don't,
talking about
Yes.
just don't.
All right, moving along, man.
Thank you, Mr. Luan.
Is that it for your report, Mr. Walsh?
That's it for my.
Thank you very much. All right, next item we have is possible action, ZBA rules of procedure. In your package, we do have a revised proposed amendment that I take responsibility for. And let's backtrack just so we're all on the same page. When this was brought up at the last meeting, the proposed revision amendment of Rule 4.6, among other things, Ms. Knoll brought up the issue of whether we can really restrict what the topic of conversation, the topic that someone wants to speak about in public comment. And so Ms. Knoll had suggested, or I guess I suggested, or one of us suggested that we both look at this. I think Ms. Rainey was gonna do it too, since she wasn't gonna do it. All right, it was me and Ms. Knoll. And Ms. Knoll then wound up asking Mike Homier for an opinion. And Mike Homier, as everyone recalled, gave us a really very well done presentation on an update to ZBA some time ago. And he wrote back an email. Did everyone see that?
I sent it to the entire CBA.
Okay. And that should be part of the record. I'd rather not put my copy in because it's got a bunch of other junk on it. Do you have a copy of it that you could put to print out?
I can find it.
Oh,
I don't have a copy of it here,
I kept
but
it.
I can find it and forward it to
Sure.
Pat.
Okay, well, let's see. Cause Mr. Homier made a bunch of,
Let me see.
tell you what, I'll just give you mine. With crossing out an email address, which is not public information. The rest of the email addresses look like they're all, well, not all, but mostly Scio Township.org addresses. One of which is not, I think Ms. Parker's, that must be Ms. Parker's personal email address.
She has two, yeah, it could be
Is that,
MSN something.
yeah,
Yeah,
can we,
that's
can
her
we
first-
cross that out, do you
Sure.
think? And then I'll just give this to you, Mr. Shields, to include in the record.
Okay, I found it here in my email.
Well, I've got it printed out. I'm just checking it. Yeah, it has your question and his answer. So I'll give this to you, Mr. Shields, but basically, Mr. Homier recommended not restricting the subject of public comment. And frankly, I am persuaded.
Mostly on First Amendment grounds.
Yeah.
Not OM.
I wonder, I'm not sure that we do want to include that in the public record. I'd be a little bit concerned about waiver of the attorney-client privilege.
I was
Oh.
thinking about that too.
Well, then maybe we shouldn't include it. Where can we,
Yeah.
where can we keep this? You're gonna keep it as part of your emails, Kathy? Is that possible?
Well, that's not a forever situation here.
And neither is mine.
She has to have some process.
Yeah, the township should have a process somehow of placing attorney-client or attorney correspondence in the appropriate place.
I'm gonna forward it to you, Christie.
Thank you. I'll take care of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christie. Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
couple of personal emails that shouldn't be on there. So
I'll
I'm not
redact it.
gonna get it.
Yeah, I can redact it.
Yeah, give me that back. In any event, with that in mind, that I am persuaded and, I have redrawn the proposed revised amendment to Rule 4.6, so it's included in your packet. And basically what this does is, allows the chairperson discretion to vary the order of most of the stuff. As stated, specifically items 4 through 10, if need be. And the reason why it was done in this order is that that's what was given to me initially when I became chairperson. I know that it was way before then that we've always done it that way. And before us, it was always done this way. So we're going back to approving what we kind of already did. Now, note that I've changed item 5, swearing in of persons giving testimony during a public hearing. Only, in other words, it used to suggest, and the sign-in sheets actually said at one point, as Mr. Shields pointed out to me, I think, that it said that even persons making public comment would have to be sworn in, which we haven't done, but it was on the sheet. So I want to make it clear that swearing in is only of persons giving testimony. We're including into the other business, the report of the planning commission. That's just because our rules already suggest, they require that anyway. And then the public comment includes a limitation which has always been the practice. And gives the chairperson discretion to limit comment if more than 5 citizens express a desire to speak. All of which which we've really never run into, but in practice, that's what it's always been. So that's what I would request we change.
And so is it appropriate to just make a motion to adopt?
Yeah, I think so.
I move to adopt proposed revised amendment to Rule 4.6 of the ZBA Rules of Procedure as presented here.
I support.
Okay, motions to adopt the proposed revised amendment, the Rule 4.6 of the ZBA Rules of Procedure, which is included in the packet, as stated therein, not the red part, which is kind of instructions, but all the rest of it. Any discussion? All right, call the roll.
Off,
Yes.
Ramey,
Yes.
Walsh,
Yes.
Shields, yes, Noel.
Yes.
So just to, if we can get a reminder to plan to just change that, and I'll leave it in the binder.
Okay.
I'll also look at the stuff I give her.
Okay, that's.
One last item.
The last item is the adjournment.
Exactly.
Oh. Move to adjourn.
So I was waiting for you. I thought that was-
Motion by Ms. Ramey to adjourn, supported by Mr. Walsh, call the roll. Any discussion, call the roll.
Off,
Yes.
Ramey,
Yeah.
Walsh,
Yes.
Shields, yes, Noel.
Yes.
Okay, great. Meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Oh, Doug, I had a
Thank
question
you.
for you.
Okay.
Did you tell me at one point in time that the gravel